morning. I am glad to be back. It's been a couple of weeks as we've been away on vacation. I kind of told how we kind of missed our 25th anniversary because it was right during COVID. We weren't able to do anything special, and so we did something special just after our 29th anniversary. And so we went on a cruise, and that was the first week, and it was a great time to Dominican Republic and the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos, and that was a special thing. And then this past week, we've been at our cabin down in Indiana doing a bunch of repairs and work and things like that. So it was a lot of fun, a restful time, to be sure. Well, when I went to the Middle East as a college student, I was a participant in the first Middle East Studies program of the Christian College Coalition because it was the first trip that was ever planned like this. We had 3 days in Washington, D.C., and I got to see a cool thing. I got to meet the Egyptian ambassador to the United States. After all, the training that we were on was to prepare us to become State Department officials or CIA agents or missionaries, as the case was for me. But all of those sort of people were part of this group. It was pretty cool to meet the Egyptian ambassador and to have him address the group. But I want to share another cool person that I was able to meet on this trip. While I was there, I wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to see a number of the oldest manuscripts in the world of the Bible. And that's an important thing for me, and I had seen in my Greek New Testament that a bunch of those were in Coptic Cairo. And so I went to Coptic Cairo. Coptic is just the word for Egyptian Christian. And so I went to Egyptian Christian Cairo and went to the Egyptian Museum in order to set my eyes on the actual manuscripts that were handwritten by all these monks and things from all these years gone by. Well, repeatedly, I kept going back, and it was closed, or it's not there, or the curator's not in today. The curator sets up an appointment, but no, then he's not there at that time. And this time, I was just dejected. I was like, I'm never going to see these things. I mean, here I'm struggling. And I was like, just got off the subway. Whole thing is closed down. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to walk a little bit. And so I walked to a shop. Adel Kamil was the shopkeeper, and he invited me in. He sat down, and I told him, I was hoping the museum would be open, and I've been struggling to get in there. And we talked for hours together there in his shop. Nobody else came in. It was just the two of us. And then he said, let me show you around a little bit. And so I'll walk with you and back toward Cairo. Now, this was some distance, miles and miles, hours of walking south of Cairo. But he said, let me show you. And so we started to walk back, and we walked through Garbage City, for example, where the garbage is literally collected by the Christians from the entire city of Cairo, and it's used as fuel to make their pots in the pottery kilns that they have there. Obviously, with that sort of pollution and that sort of thing, the average lifespan of those people is about 35 years because they just are overwhelmed by burning this plastic and all this industrial stuff that they collect, but that's their means of livelihood. But Adel, took me and he showed me someone like this. This isn't the actual person, but nonetheless, this would be what he did. He was using his foot to spin the wheel. He didn't have even an electric generator in order to spin that wheel, and so he was using his foot in order to make these pots. We continued a little bit further, and I was getting really thirsty, and so I asked, is there some place that we could stop and get some water? And so he stopped at a shop and asked if we could have some water, and it took us to the back, and there was this big barrel of water and a common cup for everyone to dip into it and drink the water. And this is one of those instances where, as a missionary, you say, Lord, I'll get it down if you keep it down. Okay? And that's exactly what I did. I drank the water, and knowing that I could get giardia or all sorts of parasites that were warned about the water in Cairo, and here I am just sipping it down. It was good water. But we continued to walk for 6 hours that day as we went back toward my home where I was staying in Zamalek. There was no money involved, there was no transaction. It was just out of the kindness of his heart, the hospitality that Adel Kamil showed me. It was an impressive thing. And that's a story that I want to leave in your minds because I love to tell these stories. I've written a whole book on these, Mondays in the Middle East, the lighter side of Arabian Nights. I want to give people an idea that the Middle East is not what you see in the news. It's not just a bunch of terrorists with hand grenades and AK-47s. There are real people like Adel Kamil who gave generously of his own time even when he didn't have money or something else to give. Well, I like to take those opportunities, especially even considering that this is where Jesus was. And that's kind of an exciting thing for me. It was an exciting thing at the time to think that Jesus, as a little toddler, was playing around in these streets. And as is usual with these tourist sites, you know, some people say, oh, here's Jesus' home. No, here's Jesus' home. No, here's Jesus' home. And you've got all these people setting up. And so I walked through those areas with Adel, and we saw that area of Coptic Cairo. Well, let's read through to, the whole passage today, since it's relatively short. That will give us a good picture of Jesus and his warning to go to Egypt and his calling then from Egypt. So let's read this together. I'll be reading from the English Standard Version, which will be the same version on the screens. It's also the same version of the Bibles that you have in front of you. If you don't have an easy-to-read Bible, that's your Bible. Please take one of those home with you. We'd love to put one into your hands. I know a lot of people come from a King James background, kind of like I did. It's not the easiest to read. So if you want something that's a bit more understandable, please take one of those as our gift. So let's read here together from verse 13 through verse 18 here. Now when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, Rise, take the child and his mother and flee Egypt. And remain there until I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him. And he rose and took the child and his mother by night and departed to Egypt and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet, out of Egypt I called my son. Then Herod, when he saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, became furious, and he sent and killed all the male children in Bethlehem and in that region who were 2 years old or under, according to the time that he had ascertained from the wise men. Then was fulfilled what was spoken by the prophet Jeremiah. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. He refused to be comforted because they are no more. May the Lord bless his word to our heart here this morning. Well, as we look at Joseph's narrative here, we see the second instance in just a matter of months where the Lord speaks directly to Joseph in a dream. That's what we see here. This is not uncommon for people in the Middle East. From our time working in the Middle East, from those in the Middle East as well as North Africa, we learned that about 90% of people who come to faith in Christ see some sort of dream or vision that leads them to Jesus beforehand. In fact, one of the people that had come to Christ that I talked to, I asked him, so did you see any of those dreams or visions? He said, yeah, I saw Jesus probably 5 or 6 times before I finally gave in. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, 5 or 6 times. Some people are just begging for that one opportunity. Lord, make it clear. And you saw him 5 or 6 times. It's amazing, but the Lord uses dreams and visions to speak to people. For example, I heard this testimony, again, from a man who was there. He came, in fact, while we were there in 2004 to 2006 in the Arabian Gulf, there was this man who came from Algeria because there was this explosion of new believers in Algeria, up in the mountains, where there weren't a lot of churches or any Christian presence there, but nonetheless, we heard this explosion of new believers. And this man came to bear witness about what that was all about, how it came about. He told of how a team of Christian footballers came from the city to play in a big game against the local team. Football, of course, we're talking soccer at this point. As the game was about to start and thousands upon thousands of people were seated in the stadium, everyone could see an approaching storm with lightning just crashing down. You don't play football in lightning. Okay, and so the event was going to be canceled. The local Muslim team said, "You say that you are Christians and your God can control things because of prayer. How about you pray that this storm holds off so that we can play our game?" So the Christian captain got on the loudspeaker in front of everyone and prayed that the storm would hold off so that they could pray, or so that they could play their game. The coach, I guess it was, the coach that did this. Over the next 3 hours, the storm did not move. It stood right where it was. And they continued to play their game. Afterward, the Muslim team leaders invited the Christian coach to tell them more about Jesus. And so, again, on the loudspeaker, he shared the gospel. Through that event in 2005, as this man reported himself, there were over 10,000 people that came to faith. Here's the thing, though. There is no Christian team of footballers from any of the cities there. Not from Tunis, not from Morocco, not from Algeria. God uses dreams and visions to speak to people. And here was an instance I heard from a man who was there, and he shared it because he was there. So I'm impressed with the sensitivity that Joseph showed to the Lord, speaking to him through dreams. He was open to it, and in fact, he obeyed, as we will see, immediately. He heard the Lord in this chapter when he was told to go ahead and marry. In chapter 1, when he was told to go ahead and marry Mary. It shouldn't really be a tongue twister, but it kind of is. You got to think, how many times am I going to say this? He heard the Lord when he was told to flee to Egypt. And then he heard the Lord when he was told it's safe to go back from Egypt back to Promised Land. The Lord used dreams 4 times in about a year and a half. That's what we can gather in the life of Joseph. So, yes, I'm impressed with his sensitivity to hearing the Lord, even through dreams. But then you've got to ask, why does Joseph get all the dreams? I mean, again, some people are just begging for that opportunity, the Lord to speak to them so clearly, like he did with Joseph. I think part of the reason has to be that Joseph was open to them. Joseph was open to dreams. If God has a direct line with people that they will pay attention to, he doesn't need another way to speak to them. If he speaks to you through breakthroughs in logic and reasoning, that's kind of the way that my mind works. And I feel the Lord's presence when I have these breakthrough insights and things, and I write those down into books and so on. Well, he doesn't speak to me then in dreams. He doesn't need to, because he speaks to me in logic and reasoning. He doesn't speak to me in healings so much. I've seen those things occasionally, but that's not his main way of speaking to me. If you listen when he speaks to you with miraculous signs, he doesn't need to use dreams. He uses all sorts of gifts to speak to all sorts of people. Let's look at our 4 elders. Darren has a sensitivity to the individual and speaking directly, but kindly, in consideration of what each person is feeling. Eugene has intuitions about what is right and wrong that are irreplaceable for leading the church. Mike has a calm direction about him that the Lord uses to allow all of us to consider the options and choose the best one. I'm given insights and creative outlook that are good, not just for writing books, but seeing direction for the church as well. Let's add a few more. My wife has special insight into interpreting and understanding dreams. Carla has a sense for seeing when people need words of encouragement and knowing just the right things to say. Laura has an understanding that all sides need to be taken into account. Steph has a tremendous sense of order and efficiency. God uses all of these to get the work done, church. In the same way that he used dreams to speak to Joseph. He didn't use logical reasoning and syllogism to make it make sense to Joseph. He used a dream, and Joseph obeyed immediately. He only needed dreams because Joseph was sensitive to dreams, and the Lord used them repeatedly to good effect. What's more, Joseph didn't sit in a corner pouting until God made this move to Egypt make sense. No, he heard the Lord through a dream and acted immediately in the middle of the night, no less. Imagine picking up your family, waking up from a dream in the middle of the night. He explains it to Mary. He says, we got to go. How many of you would be open to that? I mean, he was open to it because he saw it. But how many of you wives would be open to your husband waking you up in the middle of the night saying, pack your stuff, we're out of here? It's a hard thing to think of what she was going through as well. But Father knows best, even foreign lands. Well, learning from your mistakes or not. Herod did not learn from his mistakes. We saw last week how Herod was approached by these wise men who are saying, we're coming and we're asking, where is the one born king of the Jews? Herod kind of thinks to himself, well, I'm the king of the Jews. Obviously, he was wrong in that. He was Idumean. He did not have the heritage. He did not have the lineage. He did not have the title. He was not anointed as the king of the Jews. But he didn't learn that lesson. He continued to repeat his mistakes because when he found out that he was tricked by these wise men, he doubled down. He did not learn from his mistakes. When I was in a CIO role for Pioneers, I had an employee with whom I had a great relationship for many years. One day, we were looking at a particular technological solution for the 3,000 employees that worked for Pioneers worldwide. In fact, the technology company had a solution that we couldn't get elsewhere, and in fact, we could get it for free because we were a nonprofit. And so I heard what he said, and I heard his reason and his rationale. I took it into account, but I had to decide what I thought was best as the leader of the technology area for Pioneers. I had to do what was best for those 3,000 people. Not 5 minutes later, he walked into my office and put down a handwritten note that said, "This serves as my resignation." About a year and a half later, he came back to visit because he and his wife were leaving the area and they wanted to say goodbye to his former coworkers. He was really doing well. He had cleaned himself up. He had taken his heart condition seriously. He had taken his weight condition seriously. He had lost a lot of weight, and he looked like a different person, but he was just happy about things as well. He'd used that time so wisely. He had a better grasp on life in general. He pulled me aside out from everybody else, and he simply apologized for the way that he had resigned. He said, "It was simply foolish to resign over that. I miss our friendship. I miss working here and the camaraderie that our team had." God gives us those opportunities of grace, those opportunities to recognize that maybe we don't have it all together. Maybe we made a mistake, but there's an opportunity to come back to it in grace. Herod didn't know nothing of that grace. He didn't know anything of it. He was resistant. He was doubling down. He was the sort of person that, as he did, he killed his own wife and sons. He didn't learn from those mistakes. So when he found out that he'd been tricked by these wise men and did not report back to him that they found the Messiah, he devised an even more wicked and sinister plan. He aimed to kill the rightful king, the true king. That was prophesied by God, after all. And if God could control all the prophecy so that this young man would be born as a child in his district, why was he thinking that he could take on God and defeat God's plan? Then Herod, when he saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, became furious, and he sent and killed all the male children in Bethlehem and in all that region who were 2 years old or under, according to the time that he had ascertained from the wise men. When we hear of someone who has lost a child due to miscarriage, it breaks our heart. It's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I just can't imagine what you're going through. When we hear of a case of sudden infant death syndrome, it's even worse because they're holding the child in their arms, they put them to bed at night, and then the child never wakes up in the morning. It just tears at our hearts. We can't imagine the misery. It's just suffocating to think of that. Now, multiply that by 20 or 30 in one small village of about 500 people. And in fact, in the surrounding areas, we can easily double that to 40 or 60 little boys that just didn't wake up in the morning. They didn't wake up in the morning because they were killed, slaughtered by these soldiers. That was my estimate, and then it turned out that William Barclay said the exact same thing. Then he adds that number, that it was about 60 young boys that died that morning. It wasn't just sudden infant death syndrome that struck one family. Sudden infant death syndrome struck every family with one of these boys. Instead of waking up in the morning and changing a diaper, parents were cleaning up the bloodstain and planning for 40 to 60 funerals. It's likely that people simply went from one funeral to the other funeral to the other funeral all day long because they bury them that day that they die. That's when the funeral has to take place. 60 funerals of people that you know dying all at once. Little babies. What tears at our emotions like this? Is it because these little boys were white? Well, they probably weren't. So that's not it. Is it because these little boys were Christians like us? No, they weren't Christians. They were Jews, if anything. These boys mattered because they bore the image of God. It's kind of like those 200 faces that we saw in the video earlier. They all matter because they bear the image of God. We care about life. We object and we scream out loud, no, don't kill people, because they matter. They bear the image of God. These boys mattered because they bore the image of God. That is why the horrible tragedy in Minneapolis shakes us to our core. Any sane person is disgusted when someone treats human life with such contempt and disregard. This gunman was not a sane person. Herod was not a sane person. He had the opportunity to learn from his mistakes. He persisted in his own delusion. The weeping prophet and the weeping prophecy. As we look at our final point here today, we focus in on the prophecy of Jeremiah, where he wrote this. He said, "Then was fulfilled what was spoken by the prophet Jeremiah. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and loud lamentation. Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be comforted because they are no more." There are a few bits of history that make this passage that much more meaningful to us regarding the person of Rachel. She was, of course, the wife of Jacob and the mother of Joseph and Benjamin. We know that she struggled with infertility for much of her life, and so she was only able to produce 2 children. And those then became the favorite children of Jacob because she was his chosen wife, his wife that he just loved so deeply. For example, regarding her character and her nature, she stole her father's household gods. Now, That's a couple of things right there. First of all, why was she worshiping to those gods anyway? Secondly, why did she steal them? Thirdly, why did she lie to her father's face and say, oh, the way of women is upon me. I can't get up off of my saddle while you search for these gods. So she wasn't the model of morality that we would expect. Nevertheless, she had a deep love for her children, even though she didn't see them grow up. She didn't see them grow up because she died while giving birth to Benjamin. She didn't have it easy. She struggled. Even when she named on her deathbed, while she was, giving birth, she named this child Ben-Oni, son of my struggle. How would you like to grow up with that name, right? Well, Jacob saw that, and he was like, no, we're going to call him son of my right hand. And, give him a little bit of a leg up in the world, not have him grow up and being a struggle from the very beginning. Rachel is the epitome of struggle and strife because she didn't even have the opportunity to see her children grow up after these struggles with infertility. She was laid to rest in Ramah. So the village of Ramah symbolizes Rachel's struggle. People would know that's where Rachel's grave is. It's not the normal place. It's just where she happened to die while she was giving birth to Benjamin. When the weeping prophet, that's the nickname for Jeremiah, when he gave this prophecy, he said, a voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and loud lamentation. Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be comforted because they are no more. He was referring clearly to the exile of Judah. Judah was the other tribe that was going to be taken out. The first 10 tribes had been taken out into exile in 722 BC. Now it's coming up again where the people still have not learned from their mistakes. They continue to worship these idols. Even though Isaiah preached to them, give up the worship of these idols or you're going to be exiled. Then they were exiled. And then Jeremiah comes on the scene and says, look at what happened to Israel. Would you guys learn your lessons? Stop doing what you're doing. Stop worshiping these idols or you're going to be exiled as well. And that's what he's referring to. They didn't learn from their mistakes. The reference to Rachel in Ramah carries with it deep meaning. After all, here was a woman who longed to see her children, but she could not. She could not because she died and she was buried in Ramah. So her life and her death symbolize this idea of not seeing those children. And this is when it comes so clear. Ramah was the very city where the people of Jerusalem would have to walk through in their trek to Babylon. They walked through the very village. They walked past her grave. It was almost as though she was shouting from the grave, what is this? I'm weeping for my children because they're going off to Babylon. They were no longer. Now, Matthew calls on that same deep-seated emotion of grief at the loss of children on account of Herod's mass casualty event. In this tiny little village, only an insane person would seek to slaughter young children to kill the rightful king of a people. But in a master stroke of emotion, Matthew directed people to think about Rachel, to think about her loss, to think about her longing to see her children. Apply that then to the loss of these 60. Picture is perfect. A perfect example of what we read even in Revelation 12, that the dragon attempted to devour the child that would be born to the woman. That is the people of Israel. That's the Messiah. The dragon attempted to destroy the promised child, leaving a wake of unimaginable destruction. That is antisemitism at its heart. And if the devil cannot destroy the Hebrew people, he will aim to destroy the Messiah of the Hebrew people. If he can't destroy the Messiah of the people, then he will aim to destroy the people that are affected by that Messiah. In other words, you and me. That's how anti-Semitism and anti-Christian persecution are tied together. And in fact, we see that in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 18 and 19. Be 8, that's what it is. Be sober-minded. Be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. This is written to Christians. This is all about you and me, that we need to be on guard, that we need to be sober-minded, that we need to be watchful. Resist him, firm in your faith, knowing that the same kinds of suffering are being experienced by your brotherhood throughout the world. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is not making mountains of molehills. This is not eschatological paranoia. This is the day-to-day news, August of 2020. Jews and Christians are under attack. Today's passage is not just about a tiny hamlet 2,000 years ago. The Bible teaches us constantly, ready in our own hearts. Make sure there is no unconfessed sin in our lives. The Bible teaches us to be sober, to be aware. Father knows best. He doesn't want you to be unprepared. So what are you going to do about this? Is there something that's going to change in your life that because of this, it's going to motivate you to live differently? Who are you going to tell? There's someone that needs to hear about this, even the link between antisemitism and the persecution of Christians, the way the devil is coming after people of God. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, I pray that you will keep us sober-minded, keep us watchful, keep us aware, but not in fear. We don't have to fear the enemy, the devil, because obviously we know that you are more powerful. You can protect even Jesus through the midst of a slaughter of young boys. And we know you can protect us, but God, let us be aware of the times and aware of the threats that are all around us. In Jesus' name.